Picture this. You're floating through space for 3 whole generations. That's what happened to the Kethvar. These weren't just any aliens. We're talking about a proud warrior race, 7 feet tall with 4 arms each, living on massive arc ships that drifted between star systems like cosmic hobos. But let me paint you the real picture here. These arc ships weren't some fancy vacation cruisers. Think of them as floating cities that had seen way better days. Metal corridors that groaned with every micrometeorite impact. Air recyclers that wheezed and coughed, working overtime just to keep everyone breathing. The walls were covered with scratches and dents from decades of makeshift repairs. The Kethvar children had never seen a real planet. Can you imagine that? Growing up knowing that somewhere out there, other kids were running through grass, feeling real sunlight on their faces, while you're stuck breathing recycled air and walking on metal floors your entire life. These kids would press their faces against the tiny portholes, staring at distant stars and wondering if they'd ever find a place to call home. Everyone had kicked them out, and I mean everyone. The Altari Council took one look at their warrior culture and said they were too violent. Now, the Kethvar weren't mindless brutes. They had this whole complex honor system, codes of conduct that went back thousands of years. But the Altari didn't care. They saw the ritual scars, the ceremonial weapons, and decided these people were just too dangerous to have around. The Zephyrian Collective was even worse. They thought the Kethvar honor codes were backwards and primitive. The Zephyrians were all about this collective consciousness thing, making decisions as a hive mind. They couldn't understand why the Kethvar valued individual honor and personal responsibility. To them, the idea of settling disputes through combat, even ceremonial combat, was absolutely barbaric. Then there was the crystalline hegemony. These guys were the worst snobs in the galaxy. They lived in these perfect crystal cities and thought anyone who used organic technology or had messy emotions was beneath them. When the Kethvar showed up at their borders, desperate for just passage through their territory, the hegemony barely acknowledged them as intelligent life. They called their ways barbaric and unsuitable for civilized space. But here's the kicker. Even the Veil Runners turned them away. The Veil Runners were like the galaxy's ultimate outcasts, nomads who accepted pretty much anyone. Pirates, refugees, exiles. If you had nowhere else to go, the Veil Runners would take you in. They had this whole philosophy about freedom and accepting differences. But even they couldn't handle the Kethvar. There was this cultural mix-up, something about a greeting ritual that went wrong. A young Kethvar warrior, trying to show respect, performed what he thought was a proper greeting ceremony. But the Veil Runners saw it as a challenge to combat. Before anyone could explain, blood was shed, people died, and just like that, even the galaxy's most accepting outcasts wanted nothing to do with them. Their numbers were dropping fast. It wasn't just a lack of resources, though that was bad enough. The water recyclers were failing more often. Food synthesizers were breaking down. But the worst part was watching their people lose hope. The older generation remembered their homeworld, remembered what it felt like to belong somewhere. But as they died off, they took those memories with them. The middle generation, the ones who had lived through the exile, they were angry, bitter. Some of them wanted to take what they needed by force, to stop asking for permission and just claim a piece of space for themselves. But War Chief Thakmor knew that path would only prove everyone right about them being violent barbarians. And the kids? The kids born on those arc ships had never known anything but rejection. They grew up learning that the answer was always going to be no, that there was no place in the galaxy for people like them. Some of the teenagers had started talking about just giving up, about finding an empty star system and calling a home, even if it meant slowly dying out over the next few generations. The ships themselves were falling apart. 3 generations of constant travel, of jury-rig repairs and patched hull breaches. They were burning through their emergency reserves just to keep the life support running. Every jump between star systems was a gamble. Would the engines hold together? Would they have enough fuel to reach the next system? When their long-range scouts picked up radio signals from this little blue planet in some forgotten corner of space, most of the Fleet Council didn't even want to investigate. They'd heard radio signals before. They'd followed promising leads that led nowhere. Admiral Keveth, one of the council members, actually laughed when the scouts brought their report. "Another dead end," he said. "Another species that will slam the door in our faces." But War Chief Thakmore was different. Maybe it was desperation, or maybe it was something else. He looked at those signal readings and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not hope, exactly. He was too experienced for that. But curiosity. These signals were different somehow. Chaotic. Multiple languages, multiple sources. Like this little planet was full of different peoples all talking at once. Most of their leaders figured it'd be just another species that would take one look at them and send them packing. But they were running out of options, running out of time, and running out of space to run to. But humans were different. Captain Beth Miller was just having another boring day hauling cargo through the outer rim when her sensors went crazy. These weren't normal readings. We're talking about massive objects, bigger than anything she'd ever seen. Most captains would have immediately turned around and burned engines getting as far away as possible. Others might call for military backup or started broadcasting emergency signals. But Beth, she slowed down and took a closer look. Her crew thought she'd lost her mind. "Captain, those things are huge," her engineer Jake whispered, staring at the scanner displays. Each one of those ships could carry 1,000,000 people, maybe more. Her navigator Lisa was already plotting escape routes, her fingers hovering over the jump drive controls. "We should report this to Earth Command and let them handle it." But something about those ships struck Beth as sad. They weren't arranged in attack formation. They weren't broadcasting threats or demands. They were just drifting there like they were lost. The energy signatures were weak, inconsistent. These weren't warships ready for battle. These were refugee ships barely holding together. So Beth did something that would change everything. She opened a communication channel and tried to talk to them. Now, Beth's attempt at universal language was probably horrible. She'd picked up bits and pieces during her cargo runs to different systems, but she was no diplomat. She stumbled over pronunciation, mixed up grammar, probably insulted someone's mother by accident. But here's the thing, she tried. And more importantly, her voice carried something the Kethvar hadn't heard in decades, genuine concern. The first Kethvar to respond was a communications officer named Zektal. He'd been monitoring space frequencies for so long, listening to the cold, formal diplomatic channels, the territorial warnings, the demands for identification and credentials. But this human voice was different. It was warm, uncertain, almost friendly. "This is Captain Miller of the merchant vessel Lucky Strike," Beth said, her words careful and slow. Are you okay out there? Do you need help?" Zektal nearly fell out his chair. In 3 generations of space travel, no one had ever asked if they were okay. No one had ever offered help before, demanding something in return. The communication went up the chain of command fast. War Chief Thakmore himself came to the communication station, his 4 arms crossing in the gesture of disbelief that his people used. "Play it again," he ordered. They did. And there was again that simple question. "Do you need help?" When Thakmore finally responded, his voice was carefully controlled. He'd learned to speak with the measured tones of diplomacy, to hide the desperation that might make his people appear weak. But this human captain threw him off balance with her next questions. She didn't ask for their weapon specifications. Every other species had wanted to know what kind of firepower they were carrying, whether they posed a threat. She didn't demand to know their territorial claims or their reasons for being in this sector of space. She didn't ask for their genetic profiles or technological capabilities. Instead, Beth Miller asked, "Do you need food? Medical supplies? Somewhere to dock and fix your ships?" The bridge of the Kethvar flagship went completely silent. Several crew members looked at each other like they'd heard wrong. Their translation systems must be malfunctioning, right? No species just offered resources to complete strangers. There had to be a catch, some hidden demand or condition. But there wasn't. When Thakmore finally found his voice again, he decided to tell the truth. Maybe it was exhaustion, or maybe something about this human's tone made him want to be honest. He told her everything, their exile, their wandering, 3 generations of rejection. He expected her to cut the communication. to wish them luck, and send them on their way like everyone else had. Beth's response was so simple it was devastating. Well, Earth's got plenty of room. Come on home. That word home hit Thakmore like a physical blow. He actually staggered, his forearms reaching out to steady himself against the console. His second-in-command, Sub-Chief Relmore, caught his arm with a look of concern. "Sir, are you all right?" Thakmore couldn't speak for a moment. He hadn't heard anyone say that word to his people in decades, not since they'd been driven from their original homeworld. Other species had offered temporary sanctuary, limited resources, conditional assistance, but no one had ever said home like it was something they could actually have again. The word echoed through the ship's communication system, and all across the Kethvar fleet, people stopped what they were doing. Children who had never seen a planet looked up from their lessons. Adults paused in their endless maintenance routines. Elders who had given up hope felt something stirring in their chests that they thought was dead forever. "Home," Thakmore whispered, and his voice cracked on the word. That's when the Kethvar realized something incredible about humans. We don't just tolerate differences. We're curious about them. We don't see strangers as threats by default. We see them as potential friends who just happen to be lost. And when someone needs help, our first instinct isn't to protect what's ours. It's to ask how we can share it. Captain Beth Miller didn't know she was making history that day. She was just being human. Now, it wasn't all smooth sailing. The Kethvar had these ritual combat traditions that didn't exactly mesh with human law. Their way of raising kids commonly confused the hell out of social workers. Some towns were pretty nervous about 7-foot-tall, four-armed aliens who settled arguments with ceremonial fights. Let me tell you about the first major incident. It happened in a small town called Cedar Falls, about 3 months after the first Kethvar families had settled there. 2 Kethvar adults, Veltar and Grixlon, had a disagreement over water rights of their crops. Back on their homeworld, this would have been settled with a formal combat ritual. Not to the death, mind you, just until one yielded or was clearly outmatched. So these 2 aliens meet in the town square at dawn, pull out these ceremonial bladed weapons, and start what they considered a perfectly normal dispute resolution process. The problem? Half the town woke up thinking aliens were trying to kill each other in their main street. Police Chief Tommy Rodriguez got the call at 6:15 a.m. "Chief, we got aliens fighting with swords downtown." By the time he arrived, there was already a crowd of confused humans watching 2 Kethvar warriors circling each other with elaborate weapons, following what was clearly some kind of ritual pattern. The social workers were having their own nightmares. Janet Walsh had been doing family services for 20 years, but nothing prepared her for Kethvar child-rearing practices. These aliens raised their kids collectively. Not just mom and dad, but the whole community was responsible for every child. Kids would rotate between different family units, learning different skills and trades. "I had this moment," Janet later told reporters, "where I'm sitting in my office with this Kethvar family, trying to explain our custody laws, and I realize I'm the one who sounds crazy. They're telling me how every child in their community gets love and attention from dozens of adults, and I'm explaining why that's somehow wrong according to our paperwork." Some towns were genuinely scared. Picture this. You're used to humans, maybe some differences in height and build, but everyone basically looks the same. Then these 7-foot-tall, four-armed aliens show up in your neighborhood grocery store. The first time a Kethvar mother named Kedare went shopping for her family, 3 people called the police just because she existed in public. But here's the thing about humans. For every problem, we found 10 solutions. And most of those solutions came from the most unexpected places. Take the combat tradition issue. Instead of banning it outright, Judge Patricia Lee in Cedar Falls came up with something brilliant. She created legal frameworks for ceremonial dispute resolution, basically turning Kethvar combat rituals into a legitimate part of the legal system, complete with safety regulations and official referees. Within 6 months, humans were asking to learn these combat techniques for stress relief and exercise. Those Kethvar engineers who'd spent generations keeping ancient tech running with spare parts and prayers, our industrial centers couldn't get enough of them. Factory supervisor Mike Chun in Detroit still talks about the day a Kethvar engineer named Thalik looked at their broken assembly line, and fixed it with parts from a coffee machine and some wire hangers. This guy walks up the machinery that our best tech said was dead. Mike laughs. And he's got it humming like new in 2 hours using stuff from the break room. Turns out when you spend 70 years keeping starships running with no replacement parts, Earth technology is like playing with toys. Their warriors became the most popular instructors at military academies. Colonel Lisa Park at Fort Braxton had to set up a waiting list because so many soldiers wanted to train with Kethvar combat masters. These aliens have been perfecting hand-to-hand combat for thousands of years, she explained. A Kethvar warrior with 4 arms can teach you things about leverage and positioning that no human instructor ever thought of. And the kids? Oh man, the kids were where the real magic happened. Human children just walked up to young Kethvar and started playing games, teaching them Earth sports while learning alien songs. Language barriers meant nothing when you're 8 years old and someone wants to play catch. Little Amy Rodriguez, that's Police Chief Tommy's daughter, became best friends with a young Kethvar named HFY. Amy taught HFY how to ride a bicycle, which was hilarious because imagine a 4-armed alien trying to figure out balance on 2 wheels. In return, HFY taught Amy these beautiful harmonic songs that Kethvar children learned, songs that required multiple vocal tones at once. Within months, you had mixed communities everywhere. Human farmers working alongside Kethvar agriculturalists, creating farming techniques that boosted crop yields across entire continents. The Kethvar had this amazing understanding of soil chemistry from their hydroponic ship gardens, while humans brought mechanization and large-scale planning. Bob Turner's farm in Kansas became a model for the whole world. He partnered with the Kethvar family, the Mortek clan, and their hybrid farming techniques increases corn yield by 300%. They understand plants in ways we never thought of, Bob explained to agricultural reporters. And we've got machines they'd never dreamed of, put together, and you've got something beautiful. The cultural mixing was incredible. Kethvar healing ceremonies became popular in human hospitals for stress relief. Human music festivals started featuring Kethvar throat singers. Mixed species cooking became a whole new cuisine category. It was beautiful because it proved something important about humanity. We don't just tolerate differences. We celebrate them and make them stronger. 18 months later, the hegemony showed up with a whole battle fleet, demanding we hand over to Kethvar for processing territorial violations. They probably expected us primitive humans to just roll over and comply. Boy, were they wrong. The first sign of trouble came from our deep space monitoring stations. Lieutenant Jake Morrison was pulling the night shift at the Luna Observatory when his screens lit up with contacts. Not just 1 or 2 ships. We're talking about a full crystalline hegemony war fleet. 37 vessels, ranging from massive dreadnoughts to fast attack cruisers, all bearing the distinctive crystal formations that marked hegemony military ships. "This is bad," Jake muttered, immediately patching through to Earth Command. "We've got incoming hegemony forces. Full battle formation, ETA 48 hours. The hegemony had sent Admiral Vextai, one of their most arrogant commanders. This guy had been enforcing their version of Galactic Order for decades, crushing anyone who didn't fit their crystal-clear vision of how civilized species should behave. He'd probably bulldozed a dozen refugee camps without breaking stride. Admiral Vextai sent his demands ahead of his fleet, broadcasting them on all frequencies so everyone could hear. Primitive human government, you will immediately surrender the criminal Kethvar population for processing. They have violated territorial agreements and disturbed galactic peace. You have 24 hours to comply or face consequences. The guy probably figured humans would panic, maybe try to negotiate, definitely cave under pressure. After all, we were just some backwater species that had barely figured out faster than light travel. What could we possibly do against the mighty crystalline hegemony? What Vextai didn't know was that Earth had been busy. See, those 18 months hadn't been just about cultural integration and learning to live together. The moment the Kethvar had settled in, our military leaders and their war chiefs had started talking. Not about invasion plans or conquest, about protection, about making sure what happened to the Kethvar never happened to anyone else who found refuge on Earth. General Patricia Hayes from Earth Defense Force had been working closely with Kethvar military engineers. "The first time I saw their shield technology," she later told reporters, "I knew we were looking at something revolutionary. These people had been running from every major military power in the galaxy for decades, and their defensive tech was still keeping them alive." Earth's orbital defenses had been quietly upgraded with Kethvar shield technology. Those massive space stations orbiting our planet didn't just look like regular human engineering anymore. They had these flowing, organic-looking shield generators that the Kethvar had perfected during their years of running and hiding. Our planet bristled with weapons built using hyperhuman Kethvar engineering. The Kethvar brought energy weapons that could punch through crystal armor. Humans brought targeting systems and tactical computers that could track hundreds of targets simultaneously. Put them together, and you got defensive platforms that were absolutely deadly. But the real surprise was who answered Admiral Vextai's ultimatum. When a Gemini fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of our solar system, expecting to see scared humans ready to surrender, they got a response that nobody saw coming. It wasn't from Earth's government or our military commanders. It was War Chief Thakmor himself, now wearing Earth Defense Force insignia. Picture this moment. Thakmor standing on the bridge of the orbital defense station Terra Prime, looking out at the same species that had once called his people barbaric and unsuitable for civilized space. But now he wasn't speaking as a homeless refugee begging for scraps. He was speaking as a defender of Earth. His message went out on all frequencies. "You rejected us. Earth embraced us. We're not the homeless Kethvar anymore. We're Earth's children, and this is our world to defend." The words hit the hegemony fleet like a slap in the face. Admiral Vextai probably couldn't believe what he was hearing. The primitive humans weren't handing over the refugees. They were standing with them. What followed was a battle that military historians still study today. The hegemony came in with their standard formation. Crystal ships in precise geometric patterns, overwhelming firepower applied with mathematical precision. It was the same strategy that had worked against dozens of other species. But they'd never faced anything like this before. The battle was brutal, but quick. Human tactical thinking plus Kethvar warrior fury absolutely demolished the hegemony's rigid battle formations. Our ships moved in patterns the crystal aliens couldn't predict, using hit-and-run tactics that the Kethvar had perfected during their years of survival. Captain Lisa Chin commanded the human destroyer Defiant, working in perfect coordination with Kethvar War Chief Baltek on the cruiser Wanderer's End. "They expected us to fight like separate species," Lisa said later. "Instead, we fought like family." The hegemony's crystal formation started cracking under concentrated fire from weapons they'd never seen before. Their shields, designed to stop conventional energy weapons, couldn't handle the hybrid tech that combined human innovation with Kethvar engineering. When their flagship started leaking atmosphere and trailing debris, Admiral Vextai finally understood what he was really facing. This wasn't just about some refugee species anymore. Earth had become something new, a place where differences made you stronger, not weaker. When their flagship limped away, trailing debris and leaking atmosphere, every species in the galaxy got the message. Earth doesn't just offer sanctuary. We create family. Fast forward 5 years. The stream of refugee ships heading to our solar system had become a flood. Every outcast, misfit, and rejected people in the galaxy had heard about the Kethvar and how humanity responded. The numbers were staggering. What started with the Kethvar's 3 arc ships had grown into something nobody could have predicted. Every week, new vessels appeared at the edge of our solar system. The Veltai, kicked out for their chaotic democratic practices. The Mordan, rejected because their biotechnology made other species uncomfortable. The Sithkar, exiled for refusing to abandon their artistic traditions that other civilizations found primitive. Air traffic controller Danny Walsh at Luna Station had to completely redesign our approach patterns. "We went from maybe 3 ships a day to 300, he said, shaking his head. "I needed a whole new department just to handle refugee processing. But you know what? We made it work." Earth's population doubled, and our planet transformed in ways that still take your breath away. Flying over any major city today, you'd see these amazing examples of hybrid architecture and cooperative engineering. New York's skyline now included HFY organic towers that seemed to grow out of ground, their living walls filtering air and generating energy. Los Angeles had these incredible Veltai crystal gardens that floated above the streets, providing shade and beauty while housing thousands of families. But the real changes were in the smaller communities. Take Riverside, Ohio, a town that went from 15,000 humans to 45,000 mixed-species residents in just 3 years. Mayor Tom Bradley likes to joke that his biggest challenge isn't infrastructure or budget. It's making sure the town meeting agenda gets translated into 17 different languages. We had to rebuild our school system from the ground up, Tom explains. Human kids learning alongside HFY children, Veltai younglings, more done spawn groups. Our teachers needed training in 12 different educational philosophies. But you should see these kids now. They're growing up truly galactic citizens. War Chief Thakmore, who the neighborhood kids now just call Uncle Thak, became Earth's first alien integration coordinator. His office in downtown Geneva had become a pilgrimage site for refugees across the galaxy. The waiting room was always packed with beings seeking help, advice, or just someone who understood what it meant to be homeless among the stars. Walking into Thakmore's office was like stepping into a living museum of hope. His walls were covered with photos that told the story of Earth's transformation. There was Baltek, the fierce HFY warrior who'd fought in the battle against the hegemony, wearing graduation robes from MIT, where he'd earned his engineering doctorate. Next to that, a picture of the Rodriguez family from Texas, holding their adoption papers for 3 orphan Veltai children whose parents had died during their escape from persecution. One whole wall was dedicated to what Thakmore called his exploration families, mixed crews heading out on missions to spread Earth's message throughout the galaxy. Captain Rita Wong and her first officer, a more done named Spiraling Thought of Rain, had just returned from establishing contact with the isolated Kixtal colonies. Their ship, the New Horizons, carried a crew of 8 species working together to explore uncharted regions and offer sanctuary to anyone who needed it. The photo that always made visitors pause showed the first interspecies graduation at the Seoul Military Academy. Human, HFY, Veltai, and more done cadets standing together in formation, all wearing the same uniform with the Earth Defense Force insignia. These weren't just soldiers. They were symbols of what the galaxy could become when differences were celebrated instead of feared. Children's artwork covered another section of the wall. Drawings that could only exist on Earth. Human kids and alien younglings playing together. Crude crayon sketches of mixed-species families. Paintings of Earth with dozens of different types of ships in orbit, all labeled home in various languages and symbol systems. A young reporter named Kevin Chen once asked him what made humanity different from everyone else during a galactic news interview. Thakmore's answer became famous across known space. Every other species asked what we could give them. Humans asked what we needed. But it was more than that, and Thakmore knew it. Humans didn't just ask what refugees needed. They asked what gifts each species brought. The Veltai's crystal technology revolutionized our computing systems. More done bioengineering helped us clean polluted oceans and restore damaged ecosystems. Even the smallest refugee groups contributed something unique that made Earth stronger. The Integration Office received letters daily from across the galaxy. Species that had never left their home systems were asking about Earth's adoption policies. Governments that had spent centuries enforcing racial purity were quietly sending observers to study our mixed communities. Earth became more than just a planet. It became a promise that somewhere in this vast, cold universe, there's always a place to call home. We proved that strength doesn't come from similarity. It comes from connection. That the galaxy's greatest resource isn't rare metals or energy sources. It's the incredible diversity of intelligent life, all working together towards something better. And every day, more ships appeared at our borders, carrying people who heard the most beautiful rumor in galactic history. There's a place where nobody asks where you're from, only where you want to go.